When you think about it, the gray wolf is, well, it's just an animal, right? But somehow it carries this incredible cultural weight. It's a creature that inspires both fierce loyalty and at the same time this really intense hatred, sometimes in the very same community. So how? How can one single species be so polarizing?
So on one hand, you've got the wolf as this powerful, majestic symbol of untamed wilderness. It's an icon of a healthy ecosystem. But on the other hand, for a lot of people, it's a very real threat to their livestock, to hunting traditions, to a whole rural way of life. And we're not talking about minor disagreements here. These are deeply held, totally opposing worldviews, and they're all focused on this one animal.
And that's really the big question we're tackling here, right? Why? Why is the debate about wolves so emotional, so incredibly divided? Well, it turns out the answer has a lot less to do with the wolf itself, and so much more to do with us.
To really get a handle on this, we've got to unpack what researchers would call a social conflict. This isn't just about figuring out how to manage an animal population. No, it's about managing human relationships, our values, and our fears.
And here's the thing, this is absolutely the key. The wolf almost acts as a cultural lightning rod. You'll find the debates about wolves are often proxy battles from much bigger fights. Rural versus urban values, traditional livelihoods versus modern environmentalism. They're about these fundamentally different ideas of humanity's place in the natural world.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds messy, complicated, maybe even impossible to sort out. But believe it or not, researchers have developed this fantastic tool that brings a little bit of clarity to all the chaos. It's a framework that helps us systematically understand why different people feel the way they do. It's called the VIPs framework, and it was put together by researchers like Shelby Carlson and her colleagues. VIPs, VIPS, stands for Values, Identity, and Place. And by looking at pretty much any wildlife conflict through these three lenses, we can start to see the hidden patterns behind all the noise.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use this VIPs framework as our roadmap. We'll look at each of these three factors one by one. First, V for values. That's our core beliefs. Then I for identity, the social groups that we feel we belong to. And finally, P for place, our actual physical proximity to wolves. Together, these three things might just solve the wolf paradox.
All right, let's dive in. First up in our VIPs framework is V for values. This really gets at our fundamental beliefs about how the world is supposed to work.
When it comes to how we value wildlife, researchers have found that most of us tend to lean into one of two main camps here. The first is what they call a mutualism orientation. This sees animals as part of our extended social family, almost like they deserve care and rights. The other is a domination orientation, which tends to view wildlife more as a resource that exists for human benefit and use. And as you can probably imagine, these two very different starting points lead to very, very different conclusions about wolves.
Okay, so after values, we have I for identity. This is all about the social groups we're a part of and how they shape our entire worldview. I mean, think about it. Whether you see yourself as a hunter, a rancher, environmentalist, or maybe an animal rights advocate, that powerfully influences how you interpret any information you hear about wolves. Our groups, they give us a lens for making sense of the world. But here's where it gets really interesting. Identity, it's not the whole story. This chart from that Carlson study is just fascinating. It shows that hunters in the northern Rocky Mountains have way more negative attitudes toward wolves than hunters in the rest of the United States. So, same identity, but a totally different view. What gives? And that, right there, brings us to the final piece of our puzzle. P for place. Simply put, where you live, your physical closeness to wolves, it matters. A lot. It changes the entire dynamic. And listen, this isn't just something happening in one corner of the world. A massive, worldwide review by Barmian and their colleagues found this pattern holds true just about everywhere. People who have coexisted with wolves the longest often have the most negative attitudes. The abstract idea of a wolf is a whole different ballgame from the reality of a wolf living right in your backyard. So we've got our three pieces: values, identity, and place. But the real magic, the big aha moment from this VIPs framework, isn't just that they matter on their own. It's how they interact, how they mix together. That really tells the story. This is what I'm talking about. The Carlson study found that being a farmer or a rancher and living in a wolf region like the Northern Rockies or the Western Great Lakes, well, that's a powerful predictor of negative attitudes. But And this is the kicker. An environmentalist living in the exact same place is likely to have a much more positive attitude. You see, it's the combination of who you are and where you are that really supercharges these feelings. Okay, so we have this framework, we see how it works, but what does this all mean on the ground? For the real-world challenge of managing wolves? How do we get from this constant state of conflict to some kind of coexistence?
You know, it would be really easy to just stop there and say, okay, so as wolves return, public opinion just gets worse and worse. Simple, right? But the full story revealed by the data is way more nuanced and, honestly, pretty surprising.
I mean, get this. Even as local attitudes in some of these wolf-heavy areas became more negative, the national trend was the complete opposite. During the exact same period that wolf populations were making a comeback, the number of Americans with positive feelings toward them grew by over 40%. That's the paradox right there. Growing national support happening right alongside intense local opposition. All right, let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways here? First, our feelings about wolves aren't random. They're shaped pretty predictably by our values, our social identity, and the place we live. Second, it's that interaction between who you are and where you live that's the most powerful force. And finally, this strange dynamic, this tension between local friction and growing national support is real, and just understanding that is the critical first step if we ever want to find some common ground.
And so that leaves us with one final, really big question to chew on. If the wolf paradox is really more about us than it is about the wolf itself, well, how does knowing that change the conversation? How do we stop just arguing about the animal and start bridging the very human divides that it so powerfully reveals?